Now, House District 30 incorporates some areas in Banks, North Plains, Hillsborough, and Aloha Beaverton. So I really appreciate you joining today. This is a very important discussion on mental health and well-being during a pandemic. The event is being live streamed on YouTube, and a link to watch the event will be shared afterward. But as we may get into some sensitive information and areas of discussion, I just wanted folks to be aware that others will be able to access this information and be able to see this later. So I just want to make sure that you know that, so you don't share information that you might not want public. We're going to get started, and I want to first and foremost thank Nicole and Mark that are on my team, Nicole Vargas and Mark Watson, for helping facilitate this conversation. And I think this is like my 70th plus community conversation in the almost 3.5 years that I've been a state representative. I find these conversations to be really incredibly important. I consider myself very fortunate to be somewhat of a community connector, that I may not have the answers, but I'm going to try to really connect people to those in the field that can provide them some service. So this COVID crisis has brought us a wide range of emotional experiences. We have felt closer connection to our family, maybe. We've maybe experienced deeper connections with them where we've enjoyed some dinners together, evenings on the back porch, maybe we're gardening together, exploring areas close to home together more than we normally would. Life has kind of slowed down maybe as in what we normally would experience. But this crisis has had some small silver linings, right? Those are some of those silver linings within some very dark clouds, because this crisis is something that the majority of us have never experienced. I can't say all, because some have experienced these types of crisis before, perhaps. And I just want to know that with that brings this amount of stress, and stress because of that connection. So I mentioned that we're all together. Well, frankly, that can provide stress because everybody's under the same roof, like all the time together. So there's that level of stress. People are worried about jobs. They're worried about their bills. They're worried about healthcare. They're worried about their education or their children's education. And they're worried about parenting. Stress is very unhealthy to us, and it needs to be unpacked, and it needs to be worked through. And I am just so thrilled to have asked these 3 panelists to join here today, because they help others in their time of need. In their professional roles, they are the movers. They can help us effectively and efficiently unpack our stress. And our panelists today are Kristen Burke from the Washington County Mental Health Division, Mike Marshall from Oregon Recovers, and Elizabeth Nall, an elementary child development specialist. So each panel member will provide some information and some resources. Then we will open it up to the audience for questions through the chat. If you'd like to ask a question, please type it in the chat box. If you want to share a comment, you can do so there. And and I'll read them out loud for the panelists to answer. We had received some previous questions, and so we're incorporating some of that into our introductions. So I want to first start out with Kristen. I will now turn it over to Kristen Burke.
Thank you, Representative Salmon, for inviting me to be part of this panel today. I want to start by acknowledging that these really are challenging times when it comes to mental health. The impact of the pandemic and social distancing is really unprecedented. So I'd like to start by talking about some of the things the county is doing to support our residents. Please know that it is normal for people to experience depression and anxiety in times like these. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have a mental health disorder, but support from professionals can be helpful. Also, know that when I say behavioral health, I'm referring to both mental health and addictions. Many people struggle with both at the same time. The county has set up a new program available to all residents called the COVID Community Counseling Program. This program is provided through several community behavioral health agencies, including Asian Health and Service Center, Lutheran Community Services, LifeWorks Northwest, Western Psychological, and Virginia Garcia Memorial Health Center. The goal of this program is to provide short-term support for individuals who could just use a little extra help coping with the pandemic. We're able to provide the service in a number of languages, including English, Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, Russian, and Arabic. We can also use interpreters for other languages. The services are free and offered either over the phone or online. You can learn more about the program by going to the county website. We'll also post the link in the chat. I know that some people would prefer to see therapists to focus on other things as well. Services are still available, although they've largely moved to being online or over the phone. If you do have commercial insurance, call your health plan to find out who's on their panel. Plans often have staff that can help you navigate their care, especially if you're looking for particular supports, such as a counselor that specializes in gender identity issues. For folks who have Oregon Health Plan, please call your plan to connect with services. In Washington County, most people are part of HealthShare of Oregon, and the services are coordinated by Care Oregon. They can help you find a provider that has openings. The number's on your card, and we'll also put the number to Care Oregon in the chat. Finally, 211 is always a good resource to help locate free or low-cost counseling if you don't have insurance. But sometimes people need help right away. One of the main roles of the county is to maintain a crisis system for behavioral health. We have clinicians available 24/7 to assist with behavioral health crises as they arise. Please call the Washington County Crisis Line anytime at 503-291-9111. You don't actually have to be in crisis to call the line. If you're just looking for help, find out what might be available, or if you have a family member that you're worried about, the crisis line can help. We always encourage people to save the number in their phone ahead of time so they don't have to search for it when it's needed. Again, that number is 503-291-9111. Another resource that we have in Washington County is our Hawthorne Walk-In Center. This program is available for no cost to all residents. They can provide crisis assessment and support, assistance in connecting to services, and also just some short-term support. While they don't provide ongoing counseling, they can help people get connected to services. The center is located in Hillsborough off the Elam Young Parkway, but please call before going there. Because of the pandemic, they're currently trying to support people over the phone as much as possible, but they will see people in person if needed. I do want to talk about some things people can do to help manage during this stressful time. It really helps to take care of your body, take deep breaths, stretch frequently, and practice mindfulness. Try to eat healthy, exercise regularly, get plenty of sleep, and limit the use of alcohol and drugs. These can actually make things worse. Make time to unwind and remind yourself that the strong feelings you may be experiencing will fade. It helps to take a break from the news. It can be really upsetting to hear all of the crises and see images repeatedly. Be really deliberate about doing activities you enjoy. Connect with others using technology. Set up regular dates with friends and family. For example, a colleague of mine unwinds every Friday night from 7 to 8 with his brothers over Zoom. Finally, share your concerns about how you're feeling with friends and family. Supporting each other right now is really critical. I know that there have been a few questions that have come up, so I want to address those now. One question was, how can we address behavioral health needs in rural parts of our county and state? So it's true that services are more limited in rural areas. Luckily, the state has broadened the use of telemedicine for behavioral health support, which allows more services to be provided over the phone and using video conferencing. Most providers these days are offering these services, which can really increase the access to care. Many other providers are also offering web-based therapies, such as using MyStrengths. This is a self-directed platform that is often coupled with support from a counselor and lets people get help at their own pace. Another person asked about feeling isolated and alone and what resources might be available. It can be really challenging to stay connected at a time when we're being told to stay physically distant. We are really encouraging people to use technology wherever possible. Many organizations are offering online support groups to connect with each other. You might try calling NAMI of Washington County, who's been working on this. Other options include the Oregon Senior Loneliness Line, which consists of people to talk to. They can help others identify other options for support. There's also the David Rompry Warm Line, which is a place you can call simply just to talk to another person. Connecting with others is so important, especially now. So I'd really encourage folks to try one or all of these supports. Finally, there was also a question about what sort of resources might be available for a person in crisis in other counties. This one request was specifically around Clackamas County. Each county maintains a crisis system to support their residents. Clackamas and Multnomah counties both have very similar services to what I described earlier for Washington County. You can always contact the crisis programs in those areas for assistance. While the programs may be limited in what they can say about an individual because of privacy laws, they can still offer general ideas, and they'll usually be happy to take information about a family member who's in crisis that they may have contact with in the future. So that's my general overview of services in Washington County. I'm wondering, Representative Solomon, if there's anything else you'd like me to talk about?
Thank you so much. You covered a lot of great ground, and I want to just say that I really appreciate the knowledge that you have and the resources that Washington County has offered during this. We may have some questions that come up through the chat that we may want to follow up with you on. I want to mention a couple of comments. I'm a note taker, so I'm sitting here and I want to just say that I want to just explain the magic behind the curtain here. When you see in the chat field, you see all these resources that folks are talking about. Thank you again to Nicole and Mark for really pulling this together. And Mark has been busily adding any links and any phone numbers, but I do want to let folks know that we're going to be following up with an email of information with all of these links and phone numbers to folks afterwards as well. So don't have to feel like you can participate in this conversation and worry about writing down numbers and resources. And I just, Kristen, thank you so much for bringing up the importance of the ideas on connecting with people. I want to tell you, my mom is 87 and she lives up the street. We had we've had 2 virtual tea parties where we have just been on Facebook Messenger and been able to enjoy our cup of tea and our treat in the afternoon. So those connections are really incredibly important. And I also volunteer with Meals on Wheels. They do senior well checks. And today is my day to call seniors. And I have a set list and I call and I check in on them. And we talk about recipes and we talk about their kids. And again, it's about those connections that you mentioned. So thank you. Just wanted to bring those up because there are volunteer opportunities for people to connect to too, so that they can figure out how they can help others. So now we want to kick the conversation over to Mike Marshall from Oregon Recovers to share his wealth of information during COVID and beyond. Thanks, Mike.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Representative Solomon, for this opportunity, for this service to your constituents. And I just want to also give a shout out of thanks to your advocacy within the legislature on this issue. You and I work closely together. You're very active on the Alcohol and Drug Policy Commission, and we're trying to really end the addiction crisis, which loomed much larger prior to COVID-19, and now it's like gasoline on the fire. So I really appreciate your continued leadership on that. I'm the executive director of Oregon Recovers, which under normal circumstances, we're a community of the recovery community. So those of us in long-term recovery, I'm in recovery for 12 years. And I like to say, the people who love us and the people who take care of us. So our friends and family, and then everyone who works in the behavioral health or the addiction recovery field. But COVID-19 really created a crisis. And I want to just lead off by saying, anyone watching this, you're not alone. If either your substance use, your alcohol use has gone up, or someone you live with, or someone you love, or someone you live next door to has relapsed, they were in recovery, or you've seen them, their use increase, you are not alone, they are not alone. As Dr. Anderson at Kaiser, the head of addiction medicine at Kaiser, likes to say, is that addiction is the complete opposite of COVID-19, and that addiction thrives in isolation and dies in community. And because of COVID-19, community is very, very hard. And what folks that aren't in recovery should understand is that those of us who are, we rely on a system of what we call mutual aid meetings, but as AA or Narcotics Anonymous, or Wellbriety is a Native American form of recovery, or Dharma is a Zen-based form, or outpatient one-on-one therapy with an addiction counselor. Those are all the mechanisms around which we sustain our recovery on a daily basis. It's a chronic condition, and I have to think about what I'm going to do each day to sustain my recovery. And that disappeared overnight. And those recovery systems are volunteer-based, right? So the ability to pivot and move online was often an indicator of a number of volunteers in a specific meeting who had the resources to understand Zoom, get a Zoom subscription, and share that with folks. So understand that like, I'm in recovery 12 years, and I'm still I struggle under these circumstances because of the stress that's been created and everything else. And and I live with my husband and our dogs, and we are very privileged, and we have a great life, and we're all going to be good. But if you're alone, if you've been in recovery 25 years, but you've lost your job, you can't see your family, you can't hug your kids, your grandkids, it's a really isolating time. So one of the challenges that existed prior to COVID-19 was the lack of a one-stop shop online where you could find access to meetings, you could find access to detox centers, you could find access to treatment centers. So Oregon Recovers teamed up with Google, right? The day the governor announced her stay-at-home order, we launched OregonRecoveryNetwork.org, OregonRecoveryNetwork.org. It's a crowdsourced site, and you can find online meetings, you can find links to sober housing, you can find tips for supporting your loved one in recovery, you can find how to access SNAP benefits. We have a Spanish-speaking page, and we're constantly building it out, but I'd urge folks to go there. If you're trying to figure out what you need, or what a friend might need, or how you can be supportive, visit that site. It's crowdsourced, so it's hardly comprehensive. If you have some thoughts for it, there's an email link there, send it to us, we'll get it up and share it with other folks. Out in Washington County and here in Portland, if you have a young member of your family, there's the Fourth Dimension Recovery Center in Washington County, as well as in Portland. And I believe they're posting the website for that in the chat as well. They have peer mentors on staff. So people with lived experience, 25-year-olds who have been in recovery for 9 months, a year, 2 years, they can talk to your college kid that's struggling, or your young person who got laid off from their first job. There's peers there. If you're African-American, go online and find Miracles Recovery Center. They also have peers. The Mental Health and Addiction Association of Oregon is a peer organization, and they can link you up with a senior that has a lived experience. There's all kinds of resources there. And then Lines for Life is the statewide 1-800 number. It's 1-800-923-4357. It's in the chat as well, or you can just go to Lines for Life, and they have an amazing database that they're continually updating that can really help you figure out where's an AA meeting, where's there a treatment provider that matches your insurance. And so there are those resources. If you're in recovery and you stop going to your Zoom meeting, go back to your Zoom meeting, right? Make a plan with somebody else that you know is in recovery, call them up. It's hard. I miss them. I miss meeting in person. There are some meetings that are starting to meet in person again under very strict social distancing guidelines, obviously under 10 people now. I think is the latest advisement from the governor, but you can find those online as well. And lastly, what I'll say is, if you know someone who's been in recovery, even if it's been 30 years, check in on them. And I know there's sort of a stigma, and a lot of people, particularly us older folks, don't talk about our recovery, and yet we should. To me, it's the greatest accomplishment of my life, and I've been really privileged in my life. But I want to talk about it, and when I'm struggling, I want someone to ask about it. And if you're a medical professional, if you're a nurse, you're a doctor, ask your patients for the love of God, if they had a heart condition, you'd be checking on them. So, but if your neighbor is in recovery, or you know that they just never drink at the neighborhood block party, go by, knock on their door, offer to go for a walk, engage them and ask them. And they might get embarrassed, they might get angry, or they might want to talk your ear off about it. And that will keep them sober that day or help them get to a meeting that day. And right now, we all need to lean in. And we can't let the past stigma of recovery be an obstacle to doing that. So being in recovery is a great thing. It's a wonderful thing. It's a gift. For me, it's a gift from God. It should be something that is shared, not something that is hidden. So with that, I'll give it back to you before I start crying.
Wow. That was very well said, Mike. Thank you so much. I myself can get a little emotional on it. I'm an adult child of an alcoholic. So another resource out there for folks is Al-Anon, and being able to connect with other folks, other family members, other loved ones that are going through these similar situations. Some folks, I have a friend of mine who religiously goes to meetings, and that's her church. That's where she finds her folks around, and is able to work through and unpack the things that she's dealing with. I myself, I have a book. It's called Hope for Today. It's an Al-Anon book. Every day has some daily readings, a great little message. I sometimes take a little picture and share it with someone else that I know has experienced same things, because it's like an aha moment for me. And we all just, we all go through this. We all unpack these different things in different ways. So I think some of the key points that both panelists have spoke of, and I would imagine we're also going to hear that similar talking points with Elizabeth, is just humanity, right? Being there for each other, connecting with each other. We really need to get beyond that time of the time when we used to pull into our garage and close the door behind us, leave the door open for a little bit. And now, right now during COVID, talk from a distance, connect with your neighbor, because, as I used to say when I would volunteer and deliver with Meals on Wheels, sometimes I might be that only person that person sees in that day. And so that's why I just wanted to share that. I'm getting so much out of this conversation. Thank you so much. And I really hope that others are connecting to this as well. So I want to kick it off with Elizabeth. And Elizabeth Nall, please share your experience and your professional lens with us.
Thanks so much. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Nall, and I'm a child development specialist. And I thought I would touch on three main things that have tended to be the majority of the questions I'm getting from parents and families around the Hillsborough area. The first thing is what to do when you're in crisis or your child is in crisis. The second is, how do I wrap my head around distance learning, online school, and help my kid with that? And then the third thing is dealing with anxiety and depression and the importance of schedule. So the first one is super quick, and Kristen said the number I was going to give everybody, but I'm saying it again because it's so important, and that is 211. And the reason that number is so important is because let's say you're depressed or anxious because you're worried about paying the water bill or finding childcare, and now you're worried because there's anxiety in your family. They're like the one-stop shop, right? So if you have a need and you don't even know who to reach out to, you can call 211. You can go online. You can text them, and they will be able to help you. I would ask with every giving profession right now that you understand that there may be longer waits than usual. And we all apologize for that, but understand that 211 is just a really great number to know when you're feeling stressed out, not sure what your next step is. That's a great one. And in Representative Salmon's area, I am so grateful. in my work with families to have the Hawthorne Walk-In Clinic here in town. They are phenomenal. Their ability to take you and your family member as you walk in the door, help figure out what the problem is, and help come up with the next steps. And if you are not yet registered for health insurance, they will help you do it. Like, they will take you through that process. So specifically, if it is a mental health emergency and you live in this area, the Hillsborough Hawthorne Walk-In Clinic is an amazing resource. Excuse me, my landline never rings, and it's ringing now. So let me turn that off. Okay, sorry about that. So those are the two places that I would go to if I was having difficulty. And in our area, and in fact, the Portland metropolitan area, we do not have enough child psychiatrists, and we do not always have quick appointment times for mental health needs for children and families. But one thing I will say that's going really well is the fact that because so many providers are now doing online meetings, and because there's not the barrier of they're in school during the school day, sometimes you can get an appointment that's a quick appointment during the school day that you might not have chosen to take your child to in the past. And the advice I always give families is, let's say you do get referred out to a particular child psychiatrist, you call them up and they say, I have an appointment 2 months from now. The correct response is, awesome, thank you. I will take that appointment. Please put me on the waiting list if at all possible. Because the worst thing you could do is say, no, thank you, keep calling down the list, and then your appointment's 3 months out. But in the meantime, remember, if you have 211 in the Hawthorne Walk-In Clinic if you do have an emergent situation. Okay, so now on to school, wrapping your head around school. One of the things that I so appreciated from our families who were finding some success this last spring is that they reminded themselves that school really is made up of 3 different categories, 2 of which parents are the experts at, right? So we've got academics, super important, but we also have self-help skills and habits of a successful learner. And I'm here to tell you, yes, teachers and counselors and all the wonderful staff in the building support those 2 things, but there's nothing like your role models at home to teach you self-help skills and habits of a successful learner. And there's not a kindergarten teacher in the country that would say it's a waste of time that you make sure you help your kid figure out toileting, tying their shoes, blowing their nose, or a 2nd grade teacher who knows that you're spending time teaching your kid to tell the time or measure for the chocolate chip cookie recipe. Don't downplay the fact that you are an expert in helping a child learn self-help skills and those habits of a successful learner. And that ties in as well. I talked about the importance of schedule. So it'll tie back in there. And then regarding academics, the thing that I would say is just do not hesitate to reach out to your child's teacher. I heard from teachers last spring, we're trying to connect with parents and I'm not getting anything back. Now, many parents did communicate back, and thank you to every single one of them, but there were parents that they tried to reach out to with no success. And then eventually the parent might reach out frustrated. This whole time they were embarrassed. Instead, have that clear communication. Say, I don't know how to teach this. What do I do? Your teacher is there for you, and they would much rather you share you're not sure how to explain something. And even after watching their Google Meets 3 times, it still doesn't make sense to you. They would rather you say that. They have appointments every day to meet one-on-one with a child. You can participate in those as well. If you're not able to because you're working in another room, reach out and explain that, right? Like, just be part of the team to help problem solve the academic part. And then feel good about the other skills that you're teaching your child at home that are super important. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on quickly is certainly we're seeing an increase in particular regarding anxiety. And in childhood, that can look like a variety of things. So for example, I've got a list over here. So it could mean crying, restlessness, poor focus, attention issues, tantrums, difficulty with transitions, meltdowns about personal hygiene or homework. Sometimes it's somatic symptoms like, oh, my stomach hurts, or some other feeling in the body, headaches, and difficulty settling down for bed. Now, many of you parents might be saying, well, yeah, that's childhood, right? It's a spectrum. We all get a little bit of that with our kids, depending on their age and whatever. But what you're looking for is something that's out of character for your child. And that may be the way that they're trying to tell you, I'm having trouble interpreting what's going on in my life right now and what's going on in the world. And so if you're noticing that those patterns are changing and there are more of the difficult things on that list that are happening, it's just your kid's way of talking to you and letting you know that they need some extra time and attention and to sort through things. One second, moving to a different slide. So let's see, where is it? Okay, so there are a few different things specific to anxiety, but they can impact depression as well. One of the things, especially with young children, but even with teens, it's important to check in on their thoughts about the stressful situation we're dealing with. So you might have two children, both preteens, and one of them is thinking, literally, this is the end of the world. I cannot see my best friend. And your other teen is thinking, I get to go read in my room and they leave me alone, right? Like, our thoughts determine our feelings and our mood. And so to find out what is your kid thinking about what's going on, making sure that they're framing what's going on in a way that is healthy. So if I had a kid that said, it feels like the end of the world because I can't see my best friend, I would sure problem solve around, well, what can we do about that? You know, can we have a social distance check-in at the park where the mom, you know, promises to be out of earshot, right? But I would just encourage you to make sure that you know what they're thinking. And in particular around COVID, we have so much news coming in at us. And for a young child in particular to interpret that, they could interpret it as, this is the end of the world, right? My parent could die, I could die. Young children could be interpreting this in a way that is really scary. So we want to do our best to make sure that we give them facts. I don't lie to children, but are your conversations at the dinner table around the amazing, brilliant scientists we have on this planet who are fighting to come up with a cure, or whatever the worst thing is that you heard that day about COVID, right? So make sure and be making sure that you understand the thoughts that they have about their situation and helping them reframe it honestly, but in a somewhat more positive, hopeful way. And then just that last piece is the piece around schedule. And I cannot tell you how critically important this is for children, and I would even go so far as to say adults, right? What I realized about a month into the shutdown is I needed to take 2 walks a day. 1 walk a day was not enough, right? So I'm on my treadmill in the morning, that's fine, that's the same. But every evening I would go out for a walk outside in the fresh air. I don't know what I'm going to do in December in the cold and wet, but right, for me at least, getting some fresh air. I'm in a neighborhood that's very safe and people automatically cross the street for each other. Having that routine is just really important for me. And so to be thinking about what time is breakfast every morning, and to be thinking about the school year starting. So some of us have allowed our children to maybe switch their schedules quite a bit. And if we were to start now in little half-hour increments to get us more ready to be up and going by 8 a.m., that could be super helpful. I can talk more about schedule, but I want to stop for now and really make sure we address people's questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Again, this is just such an incredible wealth of information here from different spectrums. So what I'm going to kind of take back from you, Elizabeth, is the conversation about consistency and schedule. And I would totally agree with you. That is not only for children, that is for adults. I was literally on a call yesterday and I didn't even know what day of the week it was. So it's just being able to make sure that we, that we have that. This always comes to mind for me is when you're in an airplane and you're traveling. Someday we'll get back there and we'll be able to do that. But when you are, and you're traveling with people that you care for, or you little ones or seniors, they always tell you that in an event of an emergency and the air mask falls, to put it on yourself first before you take care of the ones that you are caring for, because you need to take care of yourself to make sure that you're able to then help them. And I think that is such an important point in all of this. In all three of these panelists that have spoken, it's making sure that we're taking care of ourselves, and then we can better help others. And I always as a school board member, I used to say from the dais, the kids are watching and they're listening. So your important point about the types of things that you're talking about, because the little kids are listening to that and they're processing it in a lot different way because of their brain maturity and their brain development. So it's really important that you are careful with the kind of conversations that you're having, but also, like you're saying, being realistic and truthful and not something other than that. So I want to make sure that we are touching base with some of the questions that came through. And Mike, I want to come back to you because someone did put something in there and I want to see if you have any other additional thoughts. But Vicki had asked, what do you suggest for those that need addiction support groups during this time? And are those groups meeting? I think you kind of touched on that, but I think if there's anything additional, like what is it? I need help. What do I need to do?
Right. So it's a great question. And again, OregonRecoveryNetwork.org, under Recovery Support Services, county by county or region by region, really, it lists available meetings that are online, Zoom meetings or phone call meetings. You can also, AA maintains a pretty good database in each region. So if you just type in AA and the name of your town, it's going to pop up and provide you with that direction. NA, probably the same, Narcotics Anonymous. I recognize that 12 steps is good for some folks, but not great for others. And so do a research on Dharma recovery, which is a Zen-based form of recovery. And just type in the word like recovery and yoga or recovery and exercise and see what may come up. There may be yoga, online yoga programs that they talk about recovery. They have people start off by sharing about their recovery. It's a fantastic form of recovery. You're doing meditation, you're being in community, and you're exercising. And all of those things are critical to maintaining your recovery. And then call your doctor or your CCO. And if you're really struggling, they have folks on staff. They have caseworkers, they have nurses, they have all kinds of folks that can help get you to where you need to be. And I think between a combination of those resources, you should be able to find the path forward that you need, and then just stick with it. These mutual aid meetings, some of them can be really boring. Some of them, there's one person who just drives you crazy. Go to another meeting or come back to that meeting. You're going to hear something, you're going to meet someone, and all of that's going to be good. But I do want to point out that anecdotally, because the state doesn't actually have a way to measure relapse, there's a huge decline I've noticed and I've heard in the number of people participating in online mutual aid meetings. And we're starting to hear more and more hospital visitations related to substances. So we're in the throes of an increasing behavioral health issue that it manifests itself often with substances. And do your best to take care of yourself. I love what you said, Representative Solomon. You know, in 12-step programs, we have a slogan, first things first. And I also want to acknowledge that's hard. If you're a 35-year-old mom and you have a 35-year-old husband, you have 3 kids, you're both working from home, and you say, look, I just got to hit pause and go to my online meeting right now. That's putting first things first, because you can't be a mom, an employee, or a spouse if you're not in recovery. But that's taking time away from all those obligations. And so for the spouses out there, that's really hard. And so if you have a spouse or a loved one in recovery, understand that as annoying as it is that they may disappear for an hour, you don't want them not to. And you muster everything you can to try and support them in taking that time for themselves, because they're going to show up for you 23 hours a day much better if they have that 1 hour a day to focus on their recovery.
Well said, Mike. Thank you. Kristen, I don't know if there's anything that perhaps you feel like should be added to, that if folks feel like, you know, I know you gave such a great wealth of information at the beginning, but it's like, if you could give that one piece of advice and you're like, I'm struggling, who do I reach out to at the county? Where do I go to for help? If there's something that you might add.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is just that resources are available, and they're available 24/7. And so do reach out. And we try really hard to have a no wrong door. So don't worry which number, which place you try to connect with, they'll get you to the right place.
I love that. No wrong door. Okay. And it's kind of along the lines of what folks have been talking about with 211 is when I was first a legislator, which I've into my second term now, I went to the 211 center over by the Portland airport, and I got to sit in on some calls. And one of the calls that came through was a gentleman that was homeless, experiencing homelessness. And he needed help because he had a connection with getting a job, that he was online to get it, but he needed to get a food handler's card, and he needed to get black working professional looking shoes. And he was like, I don't know where to go. And these folks, you talk about the magic behind the curtain. These folks are like master computers, and they are looking. And by goodness, but they gave his zip code. And by the way, 211 is available in all, I think Sandy had asked, it's available in all 36 counties in Oregon, plus a few in Washington as well. They are a wealth of information, and they connected him to somewhere according to his zip code to where he could get to. They'll even connect you and tell you the transportation, if you don't have it, what you can connect to get there. And he was on his way. So again, it was like connecting someone to that service to help them with that next step. And I think that's what's something is so critical. I want to mention, let's see. I think that there was a question that came, I think I saw about Elizabeth. Do you think you could just touch on, especially, I think this is something that I've heard, is that elementary age kids who high school, middle school have a little bit more access to social media. They have their access to their friends in that way. But let's talk about those kinders through 5th grade or kinders and younger, that's maybe not a tool that they have in their toolbox. What kind of things can you suggest, or do you know of, that makes connections with these kids and helps them with their relationships?
Okay, absolutely. So there are 5 things I brainstormed that are what you want to have in a healthy schedule. And one of those 5 is social connection. Not a big surprise, right? That's the theme that we've been listening to. And there are multiple ways to stay connected. It can be as simple as a phone call right? That funny tool that rang earlier when I was speaking, you can pick up the phone and talk to a friend over the phone. And these days, it feels like 3-year-olds know how to pick up a phone and find their friends' information on mom's phone. So a regular phone call, setting up a video call with either family or friends. And I know of many pretty young kids that with parents' help can set that up a little bit like a play date, right? And then also don't forget that we can go back to writing letters and postcards, sending a postcard to grandma, and then having mail show up again in a few days. I mean, this can actually be quite a highlight for a young child. And then I would be much more likely to allow a kid to text on my phone, right? A young child that normally my advice is keep them off as long as humanly possible. Instead, I might say, well, there's this flexibility during the lunch half hour that if you want to reach out to pre-approved people on my phone, that would be allowed. And then that concept of socially distant gatherings. If you are fortunate enough to have one of your child's friends in your neighborhood, on my front porch and on my back porch, I have chairs set up 6 feet apart. And, I tell my sons, but I would any age child that, yeah, we'd love for you guys to chat and hang out with each other. And I would think about maybe some games that you can play that don't require both people to touch the same pieces, right? But they're even funny games that they play in school involving dice and seeing who can get to 12 first or whatever, right? So each can have their own set of dice and be playing that game, or hangman, or those sorts of things that you can do with kids, even though everybody is separated in their own special chair 6 feet apart. And then certainly, I shared my favorite thing. Also, for some children, physical activity is so critically important. And I take a social distancing walk many nights with a friend. And the difficulty with young children is and even teens, sometimes they don't practice the social distancing quite as carefully. And so you may need to monitor those visits depending on who's involved, while still, again, maybe being far enough away that they don't feel like you're hovering, but making sure that that those young children are sticking to the rules that you've set in place.
Great. Those are great tips. I know that I have enjoyed several. I take some of my meetings now, I call them walk and talk. And so we go into a local park and we can stand 6 to 10 feet apart, and we're outside and do so at safe distances. Getting out. I do know that this takes, even the suggestions that you're mentioning, it does take an extra effort for those parents, right? Those parents do have to give even more of their time rather than say, go play with Janie, right? So that's the tough one. But I think it's really, it's critical that those parents then are able to kind of have their own time to be able to recharge. I noticed a friend of mine on social media had posted, I think her daughter is in like 6th grade, and she had all the kids in their own tents in their backyard. There was like 4 girls, and they all had their own little tents, and they were all back there, and they showed them with masks when they were together, and they roasted marshmallows, and they did those things. And sometimes it's just those little events, not that you have to do them every single day, but making those efforts to try to connect. Again, it's the human connection, right? We all crave for it. I can just sit here and just think about that. And so I think I want to mention some things that you had talked about too, in like Mike's comments that came up. And I know that someone had previously mentioned this, but the actual, I need help, but yet the fear of getting out there to get the help, the fear of getting themselves being around others, having to get on a TriMet because of the potential virus, right? Or, what that is. And I think that that is a difficult hurdle that we're seeing in a lot of places. People are not going to get their children well checks because they're worried about taking their kids to get their shots and their vaccines because they don't want them to have access to that doctor's office. So I think that's a reality, that people are really truly feeling that. And I think that the only thing I can come up with, and if anybody else has any other thoughts, but the importance of communication in this is making sure that you're reaching out to your doctor, making sure that you're reaching out to people. And it's okay to ask them, what are the precautions that you're taking? Because I may be afraid to ride the TriMet until I really look into what exactly TriMet is doing to make sure that their buses and their trains are as safe as possible. Or going to my doctor's office, what they're doing, going to my chiropractor's office. I had to really work myself up to that. But then I learned what all they were doing. And I felt in my mind, having that information provides a little bit more ease for me. So I don't know if anybody has anything to add on that. But I think that is a reality of this concern. I think I believe we have any additional questions that came in. I think you guys did a great job of answering some of those questions that came in through your introductory, through your introductory remarks. And we answered some that came through here, and really don't know if anybody has any final words, any other final thoughts. I know that.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having this conversation. Not only do I think it was incredibly useful, I personally found it really instructive. And I just want to urge the folks watching is use your own social media to promote what you heard today, some of these links, because you just don't know who's going to be scrolling through and see it. So I would love to have everyone promote OregonRecoveryNetwork.org. We have a little tiny budget, so we don't have an ability to really promote it, but you just don't know who's sitting at home by themselves, feeling like they're just drinking too much, or they've relapsed, or they want to relapse. And all of a sudden they see a message from you saying, hey, I was on this great call today, and there's this amazing resource. If you're drinking too much, or you're like me and you're stressed out, think about clicking on it, and just use social media to invite people to take care of themselves and let them know through social media that you're thinking about them.
Love it. Elizabeth or Kristen, you have any final thoughts? You covered a lot. It's totally fine.
I think the only thing I'd say is that the first thing I mentioned, our COVID community counseling program, it's a new program, and it's really to help provide support for the community. It's available to all ages, lots of language capabilities, and it's free, and they have capacity. So I'd really encourage people to reach out and use that, because it's a resource that's really available and could be really helpful for some people.
Elizabeth, do you have some?
Sure, yeah. So I'm going to put a very long comment in the comment, which are the 5 aspects of a healthy schedule. And one of them is fun. And so I want to end on that. Try your very best with yourself, and especially with your kids, every day to take just a couple minutes. And I've been a working parent. As long as I've been a parent, I know how hard and hectic days can be, and especially right now. But if at all possible, to carve out 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you're able to do, and play a card game, or tell a joke, or tell your child that their job is to come up with a joke each day to tell you that night. Whatever, just remember to tap into that happy, positive, fun part of life, which is still here despite some of the crazy going on. And then also wanted to thank you so much for holding this. And I'm sure all of us are available if any way we can be of help. I know that you have offered that people can still send in questions to you, and Representative Salmon knows how to get in touch with all of us. And we're a community, right? We're here for each other. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I I really appreciate all three of our panelists for providing their information to this conversation. Just a wealth of information, wealth of experience. So thank you very much. I love what you said, Mike, is you never know that one person that you're going to help. You never know. And I think that's just a great point. And I also want to reiterate when you said lean in, make sure that we're really looking at this opportunity. I mean, this COVID experience, this COVID crisis is a bit of an onion, right? There's lots of peels, there's lots of layers, and just making sure that we're touching base with people and that we're connecting with people and that we are letting folks know that they're not alone, that we are all experiencing different types of stress and different types of strain, that there is help out there. We will get through this. This is temporary. And I think that's just what's really important for folks to know is that, that folks are not alone. So I want to just reiterate too, that we are also going to share this link. Not only is it streaming live on YouTube, we are going to share it on our social media, on my newsletter list. I'm going to share the links that we have and provide that information for folks. We're going to email out the links afterwards and any additional information to folks that signed up for this. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you to Nicole again. Thank you to Mark. It takes a village, and I have amazing village people, and we're all in this together. So just be good to yourself and be good to each other, and take care. So thank you again.